In a Richmond, Virginia courtroom packed with whispers and judgmental stares, Laura Mitchell stands alone, clutching a mysterious sealed envelope marked confidential, as her husband Gregory smirks beside his young blonde mistress. What happens next will shatter a family's carefully constructed lies and expose an 18-year secret that will leave you breathless. When Judge Thompson opens that envelope, his face drains of color, a single tear escaping down his weathered cheek. What truth could be so powerful that it brings a hardened judge to tears? What did this betrayed wife know that would transform a simple divorce into the most shocking courtroom revelation Richmond has ever witnessed? This is the true story of a woman's quiet dignity, a husband's unforgivable betrayal, and a daughter who simply wanted to be seen. Every minute will leave you wondering who the real victim is in this tale of deception, and the final moments will have you questioning everything you thought you knew about justice, redemption, and the price of ambition. Follow our channel for more incredible true stories that will leave you speechless. Like and comment to let us know where you're watching from and what you thought of this heartbreaking revelation. The courthouse in small-town Richmond, Virginia, was packed to the brim. The wooden benches creaked under the weight of prying eyes. Neighbors, church members, grocery store acquaintances, all gathered to witness the scandal of the month. It wasn't every day that a beloved elementary school teacher's marriage crumbled so publicly, especially when her husband had become a hotshot attorney in D.C. Laura Mitchell entered alone. She wore a simple navy blue dress, her chestnut hair pulled back into a modest bun, and around her neck hung a worn heart-shaped locket that caught the fluorescent light just enough to remind everyone that some things, no matter how precious, eventually tarnish. Unlike the whispers that followed her, Laura made no sound as she walked down the center aisle. Her face betrayed nothing. No tears, no rage, no defeat, just a quiet dignity that somehow made the spectacle all the more uncomfortable for those who came expecting drama. In her hands, she clutched a white envelope marked confidential in careful handwriting. Gregory Mitchell entered moments later, not alone. His Italian leather shoes announced his arrival before he did, and the confidence in his stride spoke of a man who had spent years perfecting the art of commanding a room. Beside him walked Claire Donovan, young, blonde, impossibly poised, with ice-blue eyes and a smile that could cut glass. Her hand was entwined with his, diamond bracelet glinting provocatively as they approached the front of the courtroom. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Robert Thompson," the bailiff announced. Judge Thompson, a man with salt and pepper hair and decades of divorce cases etched into the lines around his eyes, took his seat and surveyed the scene before him. His gaze lingered on Laura for a moment longer than necessary. They had history, not romantic, but the kind that forms in small towns where everyone's paths cross eventually. He had watched her teach his daughter to read years ago, had seen her volunteer at community fundraisers, had witnessed her stand by Gregory as he climbed the ladder of success. "We're here today for the dissolution of marriage between Laura and Gregory Mitchell," Judge Thompson began, his voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room. "I understand both parties have agreed to the terms outlined in the settlement." Gregory nodded impatiently. Claire squeezed his hand, her red lacquered nails digging slightly into his skin. "Yes, Your Honor," Gregory's attorney replied. "My client is eager to move forward with his life." The judge turned to Laura. "Mrs. Mitchell, do you agree to these terms?" Laura simply nodded, her silence more powerful than any words could have been. "Very well. If there are no objections, we can proceed with the final signatures," the judge continued. That's when it happened. Laura stood, slowly but deliberately. The rustling of whispers filled the courtroom as she walked forward, her steps measured and certain. She approached the judge's bench and extended the envelope toward him. "Your Honor," she whispered just loud enough for those in the front row to hear, "please read this, but only after he signs." The envelope hung between them like a time bomb. Gregory laughed, a sharp, derisive sound that cut through the tension. "Is this some kind of soap opera moment?" he called out loud enough for everyone to hear. "Let's just get this over with." Claire smirked beside him, her perfectly shaped eyebrows raised in disdain. Judge Thompson hesitated, the envelope still suspended in air. His eyes met Laura's, searching for something. Permission, perhaps, or reassurance. What he found made him take the envelope with a solemn nod. "We'll proceed with the signatures," he declared, setting the sealed document aside. "Mr. Mitchell, please approach and sign the decree." Gregory strode forward confidently, taking the pen offered by the clerk. His signature was bold, flourishing, the mark of a man accustomed to signing important documents. He barely glanced at the contents, eager to complete this final formality. Laura followed, her steps heavy yet determined. When she took the pen, her hand didn't tremble. She signed her name, Laura Elizabeth Mitchell, for the last time. The scratching of the pen against paper was the only sound in the otherwise silent courtroom. When both signatures were complete, Judge Thompson picked up the envelope. The sound of tearing paper seemed unnaturally loud as he opened it. His eyes moved across the contents, widening slightly with each passing second. His complexion, normally ruddy from years of Virginia summers, drained to ashen gray. He looked up at Laura, and in that moment, an unspoken understanding passed between them. He knew everything now. The truth that had been buried for years, hidden beneath polite smiles and careful omissions. The judge closed the envelope slowly, deliberately. His hands, which had overseen countless divorces with clinical detachment, now trembled slightly. "This divorce is granted," he declared, his voice different somehow, thicker, weighted with something the onlookers couldn't identify. He brought down his gavel with unusual force. "Court is adjourned." As people began to rise and the buzz of conversation swelled, Gregory caught the judge's expression. For just a moment, confusion flickered across his face. He started to speak, but Claire was already pulling him toward the exit, eager to begin their new life together. No one saw the single tear that escaped down Judge Thompson's weathered cheek as the courtroom emptied. No one except Laura, who remained seated, hands folded in her lap, watching as the man who had just dissolved her marriage silently wept for reasons the crowd could only guess at. What was in that envelope? And why did its contents bring a respected judge to tears in his own courtroom? The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as Laura emerged, her footsteps echoing against the marble. The whispers behind her had faded, but she could still feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on her shoulders. She paused for a moment, adjusting the worn leather strap of her purse, allowing herself a single deep breath before facing the world as a divorced woman. Across the street, partially hidden by the ancient oak tree that had witnessed generations of Richmond's legal proceedings, stood a young woman. She was 19, though her eyes carried the weight of someone much older. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, wisps escaping to frame a face that held familiar features to anyone who might look closely enough. She wore an oversized denim jacket despite the Virginia heat, her hands buried deep in its pockets as she watched the courthouse intently. Laura's gaze found the girl immediately, as if drawn by an invisible thread that connected them across the busy street. Their eyes locked for the briefest moment, a flash of recognition, of shared pain, of secrets held between them. Laura gave an almost imperceptible nod, the slightest movement of her chin. The girl returned it, equally subtle. It was all they could risk. For now. Without another glance, Laura continued down the steps and turned left, walking away from the courthouse and the life she was leaving behind. The girl remained still, watching until Laura's figure disappeared around the corner before finally peeling herself away from the tree and walking in the opposite direction. Inside the courthouse, Judge Robert Thompson sat alone in his chambers, the door firmly closed against the world. The envelope lay open on his desk, its contents spread before him. His hands trembled slightly as he read the documents again, hoping somehow the words would rearrange themselves into a less painful truth. The primary document was unmistakable, a DNA paternity test from Valley Medical Center dated 18 years earlier. The clinical language couldn't mask the human story it revealed. Probability of paternity, 99.9998%. Gregory James Mitchell is the biological father of the female child, Sophia Elizabeth, born to Laura Elizabeth Mitchell on April 17, 2006. Attached to the test results was a handwritten letter on faded blue stationery. Judge Thompson recognized Laura's neat teacher's handwriting immediately. He said a child would ruin his career trajectory. That night he made me choose between being a mother and being his wife. I chose my daughter. He packed his bags and left us that same evening. 3 months later, he returned with divorce papers and a promise. He would never seek custody or visitation if I would never speak of Sophia's existence. He said it was better for everyone this way. For 18 years, I've kept that promise. I raised our daughter alone without a penny of his support, watching from afar as he built the career that was too important to include us. I'm breaking my silence now. Not for money, but because Sophia deserves to be acknowledged. She deserves to exist in his world, even if only on paper. The judge removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. He had known Laura for nearly 25 years. She had taught his youngest daughter to read, had volunteered at the same church functions, had been a quiet, respected presence in their community. But he had never known this burden she carried. Meanwhile, Gregory and Claire had retreated to Costello's, the upscale Italian restaurant downtown, where he had reserved a corner table to celebrate their fresh start. Gregory ordered champagne, his hand casually resting on Claire's exposed knee beneath the white tablecloth. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass with the confident smile that had charmed juries and clients alike. Claire clinked her glass against his, but her eyes held a new wariness. "That woman," she said, swirling the bubbling liquid thoughtfully. "Your ex-wife. She seemed different than you described." Gregory shrugged, taking a long sip. Laura always did have a flair for the dramatic. That envelope stunt was classic, always trying to make herself the victim. "What do you think was in it?" Claire asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Probably some sentimental nonsense, old love letters, wedding photos, emotional manipulation to make the judge feel sorry for her." He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It won't change anything." Claire studied him, noticing for the first time the slight twitch at the corner of his mouth, a tell she'd observed when he was presenting a weak argument in court. "You've never mentioned children before," she said suddenly. "Have you ever had any? From before, I mean?" Gregory froze for just a fraction of a second, so brief that anyone else might have missed it. But Claire wasn't anyone else. She had been trained by the best to notice exactly these kinds of hesitations. "Of course not," he replied, his voice steady but his eyes fixed on the menu rather than meeting hers. "You know I've always been career-focused. Children were never part of the plan." Before Claire could probe further, their server arrived with appetizers, and Gregory expertly steered the conversation toward their upcoming Caribbean vacation. Back at the courthouse, Judge Thompson had made a decision. He picked up his phone and dialed his clerk. "Janet, I need you to flag the Mitchell divorce case. There's been a complication. Schedule a private hearing for tomorrow morning. Just Mr. Mitchell. Tell him it's regarding an administrative issue with the filing." That evening, in a modest 2-bedroom home on the outskirts of Richmond, Laura sat at her kitchen table staring at her phone. The house was filled with the comforting smell of chamomile tea and old books, the scent of a teacher's home. Family photos lined the walls documenting a childhood without a father figure. In nearly every picture, it was just the two of them, Laura and Sophia, their smiles bright despite the empty space beside them. The back door opened quietly, and Sophia stepped inside, slipping off her denim jacket. For a moment, neither spoke, the weight of the day's events hanging between them. "Did he see the test?" Sophia finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The judge did," Laura answered, her fingers wrapped tightly around her mug. "Your father signed the papers first, just like I knew he would." Sophia nodded slowly, leaning against the doorframe. "And now?" "Now we wait," Laura said. "The truth is out there. What happens next isn't up to us anymore." Outside, darkness had fallen over Richmond, wrapping around the city like a blanket. In 3 separate locations, a modest kitchen, an elegant restaurant, and a judge's private office, 3 people remained awake, each haunted by the same 18-year-old secret that would, by tomorrow, change everything. Laura's home seemed to embrace her as she stepped through the front door that evening. Unlike Gregory's sleek downtown condominium with its minimalist furniture and sterile white walls, her modest two-story colonial had character etched into every corner. Bookshelves lined the living room walls, stuffed with well-worn paperbacks and teaching materials accumulated over 20 years of elementary education. The hardwood floors creaked in familiar places, telling the story of countless midnight trips to comfort a crying child, or early morning rushes to prepare school lunches. The scent of cinnamon and old books hung in the air, a perfume no designer could bottle. Laura slipped off her sensible pumps by the door, a habit she'd maintained since Sophia was a toddler learning to crawl across these same floors. She moved to the kitchen, filled the copper kettle that had belonged to her mother, and set it on the stove. Tea had been her comfort through every difficult night, and tonight promised to be among the most difficult. As the water heated, Laura's eyes drifted to the refrigerator door where a child's artwork remained displayed. A family portrait drawn in crayon by 8-year-old Sophia. The stick figures showed a smiling mother and daughter holding hands. No father. Even then, Sophia had understood her reality. The back door opened with a soft click and familiar footsteps crossed the mudroom. Sophia entered through the kitchen's rear entrance, a habit from her teenage years when she'd come home late from study groups. At 19, she still carried the air of someone much older, her eyes holding wisdom beyond her years. She'd inherited her mother's chestnut hair and heart-shaped face, but her amber eyes, those were unmistakably Gregory's. "You didn't have to use the back door," Laura said softly, taking down a second mug. "This is your home." Tension hung between them, thick as Virginia summer humidity. Sophia remained near the doorway, her backpack still slung over one shoulder, as if unsure whether to fully enter or retreat. "Why now, Mom?" The question emerged quietly but with unmistakable intensity. After 18 years of secrets, why expose everything today? Laura's hands trembled slightly as she poured the boiling water over tea bags. "Because he needs to see what he destroyed." The words came out harder than she'd intended. "I'm not a weapon." Sophia's voice cracked slightly. "I'm not some revenge tactic." Laura set the kettle down with more force than necessary, the metal clanging against the stovetop. She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering herself. When she turned to face her daughter, her expression had softened. "You're a truth," she said simply. A beautiful, brilliant truth he chose to erase. And maybe I was wrong to keep that truth hidden for so long. Sophia finally moved into the kitchen, dropping her backpack on a chair. Her fingers traced the worn edge of the wooden table where she'd done homework, celebrated birthdays, and cried over college applications. "I never asked for this," she whispered. "I know," Laura replied, sliding a mug of tea toward her daughter. "But you deserve to exist in his world, Sophia, even if only on paper." Across town in Gregory's luxury high-rise apartment, Claire kicked off her designer heels and wandered restlessly around the open-concept living space. The champagne buzz from dinner had faded, leaving her with nagging questions that wouldn't subside. Gregory had excused himself to take a work call, retreating to his home office and closing the door, a rarity in their normally transparent relationship. Claire found herself drawn to the hall closet where Gregory kept boxes of documents and memorabilia. She'd never had reason to look through them before tonight. The top shelf held neatly labeled banker's boxes, tax records 2022, case files, archived, personal documents. But pushed to the back, almost hidden, was a weathered cardboard box without a label. Curiosity overrode her usual respect for privacy. Standing on tiptoe, she carefully pulled the box down, setting it on the hardwood floor. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, many torn in half or creased, as if someone had considered destroying them but couldn't quite follow through. Claire lifted one image. A younger Gregory, perhaps in his mid-20s, standing on a porch she didn't recognize with his arm around a smiling Laura. They looked happy, carefree, nothing like the cold adversaries from the courtroom. She turned the photo over. Written in faded blue ink, "Lake House Weekend, Summer 2005. Digging deeper, she found more evidence of a life Gregory had never mentioned. Concert ticket stubs, handwritten letters, a small jewelry box containing a silver ring. At the bottom of the box, partially hidden beneath a folder of old cards, she discovered a photograph that made her breath catch. It showed Laura, visibly pregnant, standing beside Gregory outside what appeared to be a medical building. His expression was unreadable, his posture stiff beside her rounded belly. Claire carefully turned the photo over, her heart pounding. The handwriting matched Gregory's distinctive scrawl. June 2006, our secret mistake. The floor seemed to shift beneath her. A mistake. A pregnancy. A secret. Claire carefully replaced everything except that one damning photograph, which she slipped into her purse. She returned the box to its hiding place just as Gregory's office door opened. "Sorry about that," he called, his voice relaxed and confident once more. "Ferguson needs the Westmoreland brief by morning. Want to open another bottle?" Claire forced a smile. "Actually, I'm pretty tired. Mind if we call it a night?" Meanwhile, at the courthouse, Judge Thompson sat alone in his office, the building long since emptied of staff. Before him lay two documents, Laura's letter and a court order he'd just drafted. He'd known both Laura and Gregory for years, had watched their relationship bloom during college, had attended their wedding at First Presbyterian Church, had seen Gregory's meteoric rise through Richmond's legal ranks. The judge picked up his phone and dialed his clerk's home number. "Janet, I apologize for the late call," he said when she answered. "I need you to schedule a special hearing tomorrow. Just Mr. Mitchell. Tell him it's regarding information that may affect the finalization of his divorce." The next morning dawned with the heavy stillness that often precedes storms in Virginia. Gregory arrived at the courthouse precisely at 9 a.m., his tailored suit and leather briefcase projecting the image of a man in complete control. The text from the court clerk had been vague, administrative issues requiring immediate attention, but he assumed it was a simple formality. The security guard directed him not to his usual courtroom, but to Judge Thompson's private chambers. The unusual protocol triggered the first flutter of unease in his otherwise confident demeanor. Judge Thompson was waiting, his expression grave, a manila folder open on his desk. The DNA test results and Laura's letter were arranged neatly beside a new document bearing the official seal of the court. "Please sit down, Gregory," the judge said, using his first name for the first time in their decades of professional acquaintance. "We need to discuss a matter of significant importance before your divorce can be finalized." As Gregory lowered himself into the chair, the weight of 18 years of secrets pressed down upon him like an invisible hand. Judge Thompson's chambers felt unnaturally warm despite the air conditioning humming quietly in the background. Morning sunlight streamed through half-drawn Venetian blinds, casting prison bar shadows across the polished oak desk where Gregory sat rigidly in a leather chair. The judge's expression remained unreadable as he methodically arranged 3 documents side by side: the DNA test results, Laura's handwritten letter, and a court document Gregory couldn't quite make out from his position. "I've known you since you were a second-year law student, Gregory," Judge Thompson began, his voice carrying the weight of decades of judicial authority. He removed his reading glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose, a gesture Gregory had seen countless times in court, typically before a particularly harsh ruling. "I watched you marry Laura. I wrote your recommendation for the district attorney's office. I've presided over some of your biggest cases." Gregory shifted uncomfortably, adjusting his Italian silk tie. "Judge Thompson, I'm not sure why we're reminiscing. If there's an issue with the divorce filing—" "The issue," the judge interrupted, sliding the DNA results forward, "is this." Gregory's eyes fell to the document, his expression flickering for just a moment before settling back into practiced neutrality. The same face he presented to juries when damaging evidence emerged unexpectedly. "What exactly am I looking at?" "Don't insult my intelligence." The judge's voice hardened. "This is a paternity test from 18 years ago confirming you as the father of Sophia Elizabeth Mitchell, born April 17, 2006. The air in the room seemed to thin as Gregory stared at the test results. His mind raced through potential arguments, defenses, explanations, the automatic response of a trial attorney facing damaging evidence. With all due respect, Your Honor, Gregory said, his voice level despite the perspiration forming at his temples. Laura has clearly fabricated this document. This is a desperate attempt to extract additional assets from me now that she sees I've moved on. I have no children. Judge Thompson's weathered hand slammed down on the desk with unexpected force, causing the framed family photos to rattle. The outburst was so uncharacteristic for the normally composed jurist that Gregory physically recoiled. I've known Laura Mitchell for 25 years, Thompson said, each word deliberate and razor-sharp. She taught my youngest daughter to read. She volunteers at the Literacy Center every Saturday. She has never once in all that time shown herself to be anything but honest to a fault. The judge pulled out another document, a yellowed letter on courthouse letterhead dated 17 years ago. She filed this request shortly after your separation, asking specifically to waive any child support claims in exchange for maintaining full custody without interference. She didn't want your money, Gregory. She only wanted to raise her child in peace. Gregory's legal mind was already calculating outcomes, risks, damage control scenarios. Even if this child existed, and I'm not conceding that point, why bring this up now? The statute of limitations for... This isn't about legal timelines, Judge Thompson cut him off. This is about a human being you helped create and then erased from your life. A young woman who has grown up without a father because you decided your career was more important than your own flesh and blood. Outside the judge's chambers, Claire had arrived at the courthouse, drawn by a text from Gregory's assistant about the unexpected morning meeting. She stood in the hallway, her hand hovering over the door handle, when she heard raised voices from within. Hesitating, she pressed her ear closer to the heavy wooden door. I was 26, fresh out of law school with a mountain of debt and a junior position at Harrington and Reed. Gregory's voice carried through the door. Laura made her choice. She knew I wasn't ready for a child. And so you made her choose between being a mother and being your wife, the judge responded, his voice heavy with disapproval. That wasn't a choice, Gregory. That was an ultimatum. Claire's hand fell away from the door as the gravity of what she was hearing sank in. The pregnant woman in the photograph wasn't some random mistake. It was Laura, carrying Gregory's child. A child he had apparently abandoned and then erased from his narrative completely. Inside the chambers, Gregory had regained his composure, falling back on the skills that had made him one of Richmond's most formidable attorneys. I understand this is concerning, Your Honor. But what exactly is the legal question before us today? The divorce has been filed with all proper documentation, both parties have signed, and any claims regarding past child support would need to be filed as a separate action. Judge Thompson studied Gregory's face, the face of a man who had learned to navigate the letter of the law while completely missing its spirit. The legal question, Counselor, is whether your divorce filing constitutes fraud upon the court by willfully omitting the existence of a child from the marriage. Gregory's face paled slightly. Fraud upon the court was serious. It could impact his standing with the Virginia Bar Association, potentially even his license to practice. I'm going to continue this divorce proceeding pending further review, Judge Thompson continued. In the meantime, I strongly suggest you reflect on your choices, Gregory, not as an attorney, but as a man who has a daughter he's never acknowledged. When Gregory emerged from the chambers 30 minutes later, his typically immaculate appearance showed signs of strain. His tie slightly askew, a faint sheen of sweat on his forehead. Claire stood waiting, her arms crossed protectively over her chest, her expression unreadable. What happened in there? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. Gregory ran a hand through his hair, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard in the busy courthouse corridor. Just some administrative confusion, nothing important. Claire's hand slipped into her purse, fingers brushing against the photograph she'd found the night before. Nothing important, she repeated slowly. Is that what you call your child with Laura? Nothing important? The blood drained from Gregory's face as he stared at her, momentarily speechless, a rare state for a man who made his living with words. Claire, I can explain. Explain what? Her voice remained level, but her eyes had turned to ice. Explain how you abandoned your pregnant wife? How you've been lying to me since the day we met? How you described Laura as clingy and emotionally unstable when in reality, she was a single mother raising your child alone. Gregory reached for her arm, but Claire stepped back, creating physical distance that mirrored the emotional chasm opening between them. It was complicated, he said, lowering his voice as a group of paralegals walked by. I was just starting my career. The timing was impossible. You destroyed 2 women, Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. Your wife and your daughter. Don't be dramatic. Gregory's tone hardened, his momentary vulnerability vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. Laura chose this situation. No. Claire's response was immediate, her eyes flashing with a newfound clarity. She wasn't choosing. She was forced to choose. There's a difference. Without another word, Claire turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor with each determined step. Gregory stood frozen, watching as another woman walked out of his life, leaving him alone in a courthouse hallway crowded with strangers. Meanwhile, across town at Richmond Community College, Sophia sat in her advanced psychology lecture, unable to focus on the professor's discussion of cognitive biases. Her phone lay on her lap, screen dark but somehow heavy with potential. She had promised her mother she would wait, would let the legal process unfold naturally. But 18 years of questions and emptiness pressed against her chest like a physical weight. Making a decision, she quietly gathered her books and slipped out of the lecture hall. Outside, beneath a sprawling oak tree on the campus lawn, Sophia pulled up the courthouse address on her phone and ordered a rideshare. It was time to stop being a secret. The Richmond County Courthouse stood like a sentinel of justice amid the urban sprawl, its Doric columns and weathered stone steps bearing witness to countless human dramas throughout Virginia's long history. Sophia paid her rideshare driver and stood on the sidewalk, gazing up at the imposing structure where her existence had been both denied and revealed in the span of 24 hours. The late morning sun beat down on her shoulders as she climbed the worn steps, each one bringing her closer to a confrontation 18 years in the making. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a persistent drumbeat of anxiety and determination. The messenger bag slung across her body contained a single envelope. Inside it, a handwritten letter she'd composed and recomposed countless times since midnight. Inside, the courthouse bustled with the controlled chaos of the justice system at work. Attorneys in tailored suits brushed past worried defendants, court clerks hurried with stacks of files, and security guards maintained watchful vigilance over it all. Sophia consulted the building directory, her finger tracing down to Judge Robert Thompson, Courtroom 4B. Following the signs, she made her way through the labyrinthine corridors, the click of her boots against marble echoing her resolute steps. As she rounded the corner toward Courtroom 4B, Sophia nearly collided with a man exiting a side conference room. They both stepped back reflexively, apologies forming on their lips before the words died in sudden, electric recognition. Gregory Mitchell stood barely 2 feet away, his Mont Blanc pen poised over a legal brief as if frozen in time. His eyes, amber eyes that matched Sophia's exactly, widened in momentary confusion as he took in the young woman before him. Time seemed to suspend itself in that fluorescent-lit hallway. For Sophia, it was like staring into a mirror that reflected not just her features, but the ghost of possibilities never realized. The same high cheekbones, the same slight dimple in the left cheek, the same amber eyes that her mother had always called October leaves in sunlight. Gregory recovered first, his professional demeanor sliding back into place like a well-worn mask. He offered a polite, impersonal smile, the kind reserved for strangers who accidentally step into your path. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying the polished cadence of a man accustomed to courtroom oratory. "Are you lost?" The question hung between them, loaded with unintended irony. Sophia felt a hysterical laugh bubbling in her throat but swallowed it down. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and met his gaze directly. "No," she replied, her voice steadier than she'd expected. "I'm exactly where I need to be. I think I've finally found what I've been looking for all my life." Confusion flickered across Gregory's face. This wasn't the typical courthouse exchange. Something about her seemed vaguely familiar, like a word on the tip of his tongue that he couldn't quite recall. He glanced at his watch, already mentally dismissing the odd encounter. "Well, good luck with whatever brings you here," he said, moving to step around her. Sophia didn't move, blocking his path with gentle determination. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, her use of his name stopping him in his tracks. "I'm heading to Judge Thompson's chambers. I believe you just came from there." Gregory's professional smile faltered as wariness crept into his expression. "Do I know you?" "No," she answered simply. "You don't know me at all." Before he could respond, a court clerk approached, nodding respectfully to Gregory before turning to Sophia. "Miss Mitchell, Judge Thompson can see you now if you'd like to follow me." Gregory's face drained of color as the surname registered. His briefcase nearly slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers as pieces clicked into terrible, undeniable place. The amber eyes, the familiar curve of the jaw, the Mitchell name. His mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Sophia gave him one last look, not angry, not accusatory, just profoundly sad, before following the clerk down the corridor, leaving Gregory rooted to the spot, staring after the daughter he'd pretended didn't exist. Inside Judge Thompson's chambers, the air felt heavy with the weight of long-buried truths. The judge stood as Sophia entered, his expression softening as he took in the young woman before him. He'd known her mother for decades, had watched Laura build a life of quiet dignity despite her circumstances, and now, seeing the daughter standing before him, poised, intelligent, carrying herself with unmistakable grace, he felt a complicated mixture of admiration and regret. "Miss Mitchell," he said gently, "please have a seat." Sophia settled into the chair, the same one her father had occupied earlier that morning. She pulled the envelope from her bag and placed it carefully on the desk between them. "I wrote this last night," she explained, her voice quiet but steady. "I thought you should have it. For the record." Judge Thompson picked up the envelope, seeking permission with his eyes before opening it. Inside was a single page of neatly handwritten text, not the angry screed of an abandoned child, but the measured, thoughtful reflection of a young woman who had spent years processing her reality. He read it aloud, his judicial voice giving weight to her words. "My name is Sophia Elizabeth Mitchell. For 18 years I have existed in half shadows, loved completely by one parent, utterly denied by the other. My father rejected me before I drew my first breath, before he knew my laugh, before he saw my first steps or heard me read my first book. He made a choice to erase me from his narrative, to pretend I never happened. I don't write this seeking financial compensation or even an apology. I write this because every human being deserves acknowledgement of their existence. I write this because the truth matters, even when it's inconvenient. I write this because someday he might have other children, and they deserve to know they have a sister. I only wanted him to see me. Just once. Not as a mistake to be hidden, but as a person who is here, who is real, who has built a life worth living despite his absence. That's all I ask, to be seen." Judge Thompson carefully refolded the letter, his normally stoic, judicial demeanor momentarily cracked by the simple dignity of Sophia's words. He cleared his throat before speaking. "Would you like to add anything verbally to the record, Miss Mitchell?" he asked. Sophia shook her head. "The letter says everything I needed to say, Your Honor." Across town, in Gregory's sleek high-rise apartment, Claire was methodically packing her belongings. Not everything, just what mattered most and what could fit into 2 suitcases. The rest could be shipped later or replaced. The engagement ring Gregory had presented 3 months earlier sat on the glass coffee table, the 3-carat diamond catching the light and fragmenting it into tiny rainbows against the wall. When Gregory's key turned in the lock, Claire was zipping the second suitcase closed. He stood in the doorway, his typically commanding presence diminished somehow like a sail that had suddenly lost its wind. "You're leaving," he said. Not a question, but a flat acknowledgement of the obvious. "I can't stay with someone whose foundation is built on lies," Claire replied, her voice calm but resolute. She straightened, meeting his gaze directly. "You hit an entire human being, Gregory. Your own daughter. It was a different time in my life, he began, setting down his briefcase and loosening his tie with fingers that weren't quite steady. I was just starting out, drowning in student debt, trying to make partner. Stop. Claire's voice cut through his justifications like a blade. I saw her today in the courthouse hallway. Did you know she has your eyes? Exactly your eyes. Gregory sank onto the pristine white sofa, suddenly looking older than his 45 years. I didn't recognize her, he admitted, the words barely audible. That's the point, isn't it? Claire gathered her purse, slinging it over her shoulder with finality. You can't recognize someone you've never allowed yourself to see. She wheeled her suitcases toward the door, pausing beside him. The woman who had planned to become the second Mrs. Mitchell looked down at the man she had thought she knew. You destroyed 2 women, she said softly, and now you've lost 3. The door closed behind her with a quiet click, leaving Gregory alone in the sterile perfection of his empty apartment, surrounded by everything he'd prioritized and nothing that truly mattered. 3 days later, the same courtroom that had hosted Gregory and Laura's divorce proceedings now hummed with a different energy. Word had spread through Richmond's gossipy legal circles. Judge Thompson had ordered an unprecedented supplementary hearing in the Mitchell divorce case. The wooden benches were filled beyond capacity, with late arrivals standing against the back wall, all drawn by whispers of scandal involving one of the city's most prominent attorneys. Laura entered quietly through a side door, choosing a seat in the last row. She wore a simple emerald dress that brought out the green flecks in her hazel eyes, her hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders, rather than pulled back in her usual practical style. The change was subtle but significant. This was a woman no longer hiding in the shadows of her own life. Several rows ahead, she could see the rigid set of Gregory's shoulders in his impeccably tailored charcoal suit. He sat alone at the defendant's table, his usual confident posture noticeably diminished. The empty chair beside him spoke volumes. Claire's absence created a void that seemed to expand with each passing minute. The gallery buzzed with speculation. Courthouse employees who had witnessed fragments of the drama whispered behind cupped hands. Senior partners from Gregory's firm occupied an entire bench, their expressions grave with concern for both their colleague and the potential reputational damage to the practice. A few of Laura's fellow teachers had come to offer moral support, clustering protectively near her but giving her space. All rise for the Honorable Judge Robert Thompson, the bailiff called, his voice cutting through the murmurs. Judge Thompson entered, his robes settling around him as he took his seat. The lines in his face seemed deeper today, the weight of what was to come evident in his solemn expression. He surveyed the packed courtroom before speaking. Be seated, he instructed, waiting for the rustling of movement to subside. We're here today regarding the matter of Mitchell versus Mitchell. I've called this supplementary hearing to address significant new information that has come to light since the initial divorce proceedings. Gregory's attorney, Martin Eldridge, hastily retained after Gregory's regular divorce attorney cited a conflict of interest, rose to speak. Your Honor, my client objects to this irregular proceeding. The divorce was already finalized with both parties' signatures. Any new matters should be filed as separate actions. Judge Thompson fixed Eldridge with a steady gaze that had intimidated far more experienced attorneys. Counselor, when evidence of potential fraud upon the court emerges, it is within my discretion to re-examine the proceedings. Your objection is noted and overruled. The judge then turned his attention to the entire courtroom. What I am about to share has been entered into the court record with the consent of all concerned parties. During the divorce proceedings, it came to the court's attention that Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell had a child together, a fact that was not disclosed in any of the divorce filings. A ripple of gasps and whispers swept through the gallery. Gregory stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tightly a muscle twitched visibly along his temple. 18 years ago, Judge Thompson continued, Laura Mitchell gave birth to a daughter, Sophia Elizabeth Mitchell. Paternity was established via DNA testing at that time, confirming Gregory Mitchell as the biological father. The judge lifted a document from his bench. I have here a letter written by Sophia Mitchell, which I will now read into the record. As he began reading Sophia's letter, the courtroom fell into a stunned silence. The simple dignity of the young woman's words, her desire not for money or revenge but simply to be acknowledged, resonated through the hushed space. Several jurors from past cases Gregory had tried were present, their expressions shifting from shock to disappointment as they heard how the charismatic attorney they'd admired had erased his own child from existence. "I only wanted him to see me," Judge Thompson read, his voice carrying the emotional weight of the final lines. "Just once, not as a mistake to be hidden, but as a person who is here, who is real, who has built a life worth living despite his absence. That's all I ask. To be seen." When he finished, the silence in the courtroom was absolute, the heavy, expectant quiet of collective breath held in suspense. Then, from the back of the courtroom, a door opened. Sophia Mitchell entered, her steps measured and deliberate. She wore a simple blue dress that echoed her mother's teaching attire, her dark hair falling in waves that framed a face that was unmistakably half her mother's, half her father's. Every eye in the courtroom followed her as she walked down the center aisle, stopping at the gate that separated the gallery from the court officers. Judge Thompson addressed her gently. "Miss Mitchell, would you like to make a statement to the court?" Sophia's gaze swept the room before landing on Gregory, who had turned in his seat to face her. For the first time in her life, father and daughter looked directly at each other, the same amber eyes meeting across 18 years of absence. "Even if you never call me daughter," she said, her clear voice carrying to every corner of the hushed courtroom, "I still am. I always will be. That's a truth that exists whether you acknowledge it or not." Gregory opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came. In that moment of speechlessness from a man who made his living with persuasive arguments, the power in the room shifted palpably. His inability to respond to his daughter's simple truth spoke louder than any defense he might have constructed. Judge Thompson allowed the moment to stand before continuing. Based on the evidence presented, this court finds that the original divorce filing constituted a material misrepresentation through the omission of a child born during the marriage. Therefore, I am setting aside the previous divorce decree pending a complete revision of the settlement terms. He turned to Gregory, his judicial demeanor momentarily giving way to personal disappointment. "Mr. Mitchell, as an officer of this court, you had a duty of candor that was not fulfilled. I am referring this matter to the Virginia Bar Association's Ethics Committee for review." Gregory paled visibly. A referral to the Ethics Committee could potentially impact his license to practice, the career he'd sacrificed everything to build. "Additionally," Judge Thompson continued, "while the statute of limitations may have expired for certain claims related to child support, this court recognizes a moral obligation that extends beyond legal timelines. Therefore, I am ordering a complete financial accounting of Mr. Mitchell's assets, with the intention of establishing appropriate compensatory support for the years of parental absence." Laura watched from her seat, no triumph in her expression, only quiet vindication and perhaps a touch of sadness for what might have been. Beside her, one of her fellow teachers reached over to squeeze her hand in silent support. Judge Thompson addressed one final matter. "Miss Mitchell has requested formal legal recognition of her paternity. This court grants that request and orders that all relevant birth records and legal documents be updated accordingly." He looked directly at Gregory. "Mr. Mitchell, do you wish to make any statement before this court regarding your daughter?" All eyes turned to Gregory. The successful attorney who had argued before the Virginia Supreme Court, who had never been at a loss for words, now sat frozen in the harsh light of public accountability. His lips parted, but whatever he might have said was lost as Sophia turned away, walking back up the aisle with her head held high. She didn't wait to hear his response, perhaps understanding that some silences contained all the answers she would ever need. Judge Thompson's gavel came down with finality. "This court is adjourned. A follow-up hearing will be scheduled to address the revised settlement terms." As the courtroom began to empty, Gregory remained seated, staring at the space where his daughter had stood. The empire of success he had built, the reputation he had cultivated, the future he had planned, All of it now stood on shifting ground, undermined by the single truth he had tried so hard to bury. In the corridor outside, Laura approached Sophia, who stood alone by a window overlooking the courthouse square. "Are you okay?" Laura asked softly. Sophia didn't answer immediately, her gaze fixed on the world outside, a world that now officially recognized her complete identity for the first time. "I didn't come for the money," she finally said. "I know," Laura replied, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her daughter's ear, a mother's gesture unchanged since childhood. "You came for the truth, and now everyone knows it." The aftermath of the courthouse revelation rippled through Richmond like a stone dropped in still water. By evening, Laura had turned off her phone, unable to face the barrage of calls from curious neighbors, concerned colleagues, and persistent local reporters who had caught wind of the dramatic courtroom scene. The Mitchell case had all the elements of irresistible small city gossip: a prominent attorney, a secret child, and public humiliation served with a side of justice. In her kitchen, Laura methodically prepared chamomile tea, finding comfort in the familiar ritual. Outside, summer twilight painted the sky in watercolor shades of lavender and amber, the same amber as Sophia's eyes. As Laura's thoughts turned to her daughter, a knot of worry tightened in her chest. Sophia had left the courthouse alone, declining Laura's offer to drive her home, saying she needed to think. That had been 6 hours ago, and she wasn't answering her phone. Laura's concern deepened as night fell. This wasn't like Sophia, who was typically conscientious about checking in. Setting down her half-finished tea, Laura grabbed her car keys and a light cardigan. Mother's intuition propelled her through the door and into the humid Virginia night. She drove first to Sophia's apartment near the community college, finding it dark and empty. Next, she tried the 24-hour diner where Sophia sometimes studied late, then the campus library, then her friend Maddie's house. With each empty location, Laura's anxiety escalated, scenarios of Sophia's distress playing in her mind like unwanted movie trailers. After an hour of searching, Laura found herself driving aimlessly through familiar streets, retracing the geography of their shared life. Almost without conscious decision, she turned toward Bird Park, a place that held layers of memories, where they had fed ducks and celebrated birthdays and sought solace during difficult times. The park was technically closed after sunset, but the central area remained dimly lit by scattered lampposts, creating pools of yellow light amid the darkness. Laura parked and walked toward the children's playground, her footsteps crunching on the gravel path. The swings hung motionless in the still night air, the slide gleaming dully under the quarter moon. Near the duck pond sat a solitary bench, their bench, where Laura had brought Sophia countless times throughout her childhood. It faced east, perfectly positioned to catch the sunrise. They had sat there on Sophia's first day of kindergarten, on the anniversary of Laura's mother's death, on the evening after Sophia's high school graduation. It was their place of beginnings and endings, of celebrations and consolations. A silhouette sat there now, shoulders hunched, face illuminated by the soft blue glow of a phone screen. Relief flooded through Laura, weakening her knees momentarily before she gathered herself and approached. "I've been looking everywhere for you," Laura said softly, sitting beside her daughter. Sophia didn't look up immediately. "I turned off my location sharing. I'm sorry, I should have texted." Laura didn't press or scold. Her daughter was 19, an adult making her way through an extraordinarily difficult day. Instead, she simply sat, offering the comfort of her presence. The night air hung heavy around them, thick with humidity and unspoken emotions. "Why here?" Laura finally asked, looking out over the still surface of the pond, where a family of ducks slept near the reedy edge. Sophia's fingers traced the weathered grooves in the wooden bench, following the initials and hearts carved by generations of visitors. "I needed to be somewhere that feels like me. Somewhere with history. Real history, not the fake version where I don't exist." Laura nodded, understanding completely. "This bench has seen a lot of us, hasn't it?" "Remember when I was 7 and lost my first tooth right here?" Sophia asked. a small smile flickering across her face. I was eating that blueberry popsicle, and suddenly there was blood everywhere. I thought I was dying. You were so dramatic, Laura laughed softly, screaming about blueberry poison until I showed you the tooth. The shared memory created a momentary bridge across the tension of the day. For a few seconds, they were just mother and daughter, not central figures in a courthouse drama. But reality soon reasserted itself. Sophia's smile faded, replaced by a weariness that seemed too heavy for her young shoulders. After everything today, the letter, the courtroom standing in front of him, I still waited. After I left, I stood outside on those courthouse steps for 20 minutes, just waiting. For what? Laura asked, though she already knew the answer. For him to follow me out, to say something, anything, my name even just once. Sophia's voice caught slightly, but he never came. He just sat there, silent. I could have been anyone, a stranger, a client, a random person off the street. Even after the judge exposed everything, even after I spoke directly to him, he couldn't even say my name. Laura felt a familiar ache, the pain of watching her child hurt and being unable to fix it. She had experienced this sensation countless times over the years. When kindergartners had excluded Sophia from birthday parties, when middle school girls had whispered about her lack of a father, when high school boyfriends had broken her heart. But this wound cut deeper than any that had come before. You don't need his validation to be whole, Laura said gently. You never have. I know that here, Sophia tapped her temple, but not here. Her hand moved to her heart. I've spent my entire life wondering what was wrong with me that my own father couldn't bear to know me. What kind of child is so disposable? The raw vulnerability in her daughter's question broke Laura's carefully maintained composure. For 18 years she had been strong, had never spoken ill of Gregory, had never shown Sophia how deeply his rejection had wounded them both. Now, tears spilled down her cheeks, unchecked. Nothing is wrong with you, she whispered fiercely. The flaw was never in you, Sophia. Never. It was in him, in his cowardice, in his selfishness, in his inability to see beyond his own ambitions. Sophia reached for her mother's hand. The roles suddenly reversed as daughter comforted mother. I know you protected me. You never made him a villain in our story. I wanted to leave space, Laura admitted. Space for him to change his mind, to step up someday. I thought, maybe when you were older he'd realize what he'd missed. They sat in silence, the weight of 18 years of waiting pressing down on them both. Around them, the park breathed with nighttime sounds, distant traffic, chirping crickets, the occasional rustle of nocturnal creatures in the underbrush. I'm not waiting anymore, Sophia finally said, her voice stronger now. Today wasn't about getting his attention or his money. It was about claiming my own truth. I exist. I matter, whether he acknowledges it or not. Laura looked at her daughter, really looked at her, and saw not the child she had raised, but the remarkable woman she had become. Strong, resilient, principled in the face of rejection. Pride swelled in her chest, temporarily displacing the sadness. You're more than I ever dreamed you could be, Laura said, brushing a strand of hair from Sophia's face. And that has nothing to do with him. For the first time since the courtroom, Sophia's expression softened, vulnerability showing through her carefully constructed strength. She leaned into her mother's embrace, allowing herself to be held as she hadn't in years. In that moment, they were both stripped of pretense, just two women who had faced the world together when it would have been easier to break. Neither noticed the solitary figure standing beneath an oak tree 50 yards away, watching their embrace with unreadable eyes. Gregory Mitchell remained perfectly still, observing the intimate moment between the mother and daughter who had built a life without him. After several minutes, he approached the bench, stopping a respectful distance away. When Laura looked up and saw him, her arms instinctively tightened around Sophia. Gregory, she said, her voice neither welcoming nor hostile, simply acknowledging his presence. Gregory didn't respond. Instead, he placed a sealed envelope on the far edge of the bench, nodded once, and walked away without a word. Sophia stared at the envelope, making no move to reach for it. "Even now," she whispered, "he can't bring himself to speak to me." The envelope sat between them like a time bomb, its contents unknown but potentially devastating. Whatever message it contained, Gregory still couldn't deliver it directly, still needed the buffer of paper and distance. "You don't have to open it," Laura said. "Not now, not ever." Sophia took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders. No. No more hiding from truth, no matter how uncomfortable. She reached for the envelope, her fingers steady as she broke the seal. The envelope trembled slightly in Sophia's hands as she carefully tore along the sealed edge. The paper was expensive, heavyweight cream stationery embossed with Gregory's law firm logo, the kind used for important client communications and formal legal opinions. Inside was no letter, no written apology or explanation, just a single weathered photograph. Under the dim park lamplight, Sophia tilted the image to better catch the illumination. The photo showed a much younger Gregory, perhaps 26 or 27, standing in what appeared to be a nursery department store. His hair was longer then, his face less lined by ambition and compromise. In his hands, he held a tiny pair of pink baby shoes, his expression a complex mixture of wonder and fear as he examined them. The timestamp in the corner read, March 2006, 1 month before Sophia's birth. Laura leaned closer, her breath catching as she recognized the moment. "I'd forgotten about this," she whispered. "We were shopping for your nursery. He saw these shoes and just stopped. Stood there holding them for the longest time." Sophia carefully turned the photograph over. On the back, in Gregory's precise handwriting, were words he hadn't been able to speak aloud. "If I had been man enough, today you would be in my arms." The simple sentence hung in the night air between them, its implications rippling outward like the gentle circles spreading across the nearby pond when a leaf touched its surface. Not an apology, not exactly, but an acknowledgement of failure, personal rather than professional, moral rather than legal. Sophia studied the handwriting, running her finger over the indentation of the pen strokes as if trying to feel the emotion behind them. Her face remained carefully neutral, giving away nothing of the storm surely raging within. "Is this supposed to change something?" she finally asked, her voice steady despite the slight tremble in her hands. "A cryptic note and an old photo after 18 years of silence?" Laura hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "What do you want it to mean, sweetheart?" Sophia closed her eyes briefly, as if searching for the answer within herself. When she opened them again, they shone with unshed tears that reflected the park lamps like tiny stars. "I want it to be enough," she admitted, her voice smaller now. "I want to be the kind of person who can forgive easily, who can accept this crumb and build something from it." She looked down at the photo again, at the moment captured when her father had contemplated fatherhood before rejecting it. A visual record of the road not taken. "But it's not enough," she continued, her voice strengthening with conviction. "This doesn't erase 18 birthdays, 18 Christmases, 18 first days of school. This doesn't erase the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering what was wrong with me. This doesn't erase the fact that he sat in that courtroom today and couldn't even say my name." With deliberate movements, Sophia folded the photo in half, then quarters, creasing each fold with her thumbnail before sliding it into her jacket pocket. "This doesn't change the past," she said quietly, "but I can choose what I carry into the future." Laura watched her daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. "What will you carry then?" Sophia looked out over the darkened park where she had played as a child, where she had learned to ride a bike with only her mother running alongside, where she had practiced graduation speeches and cried over heartbreaks. "The truth," she answered simply. "Not his version or even yours. My truth. I am Sophia Elizabeth Mitchell. I was born. I exist. I matter. And my worth isn't determined by his acknowledgement or absence." As they sat in the meaningful silence that followed, the park around them seemed to exhale, Crickets chirped in synchronized chorus, a night bird called from a nearby tree, and the soft rustle of leaves accompanied the gentle Virginia breeze. Nature continued its rhythms, indifferent to human drama, but somehow providing the perfect backdrop for this moment of resolution. Laura reached for her daughter's hand, marveling at how small her own now seemed in comparison. When had that happened? When had her baby girl's fingers grown longer than her own, the nails now painted in sophisticated burgundy rather than the rainbow colors she had favored as a child? "You know," Laura said softly, "for years I wondered if I made the right choice. When he gave me that ultimatum, him or you, I chose you without hesitation. But later on the hard days when money was tight and you asked about your dad, I wondered if I should have fought harder to keep your father in your life." Sophia squeezed her mother's hand. "You gave me something better than a reluctant father. You gave me the truth that I was wanted, that I was chosen. Do you know how powerful that is?" Tears welled in Laura's eyes. 18 years of doubt washing away in a single moment of validation. All the second jobs she'd taken to make ends meet, all the father-daughter dances she'd arranged for Sophia to attend with her uncle, all the carefully constructed answers to painful questions, all of it suddenly felt worthwhile. "We'll be okay," Sophia said with the surety of someone who had already weathered storms and emerged stronger. "We've always been okay." The next morning dawned clear and bright, summer sunlight filtering through the trees that lined Richmond's historic Monument Avenue. Gregory Mitchell sat alone on the balcony of his high-rise apartment, coffee cooling untouched beside him as he stared at the city awakening below. His phone buzzed with unanswered messages, concerned colleagues, his attorney warning of potential professional fallout, even his mother calling from Florida, having heard rumors of a grandchild she never knew existed. In his hand, he held a duplicate of the photograph he'd left on the park bench, his younger self holding tiny pink shoes meant for a daughter he had chosen not to know. The moment captured in the image haunted him now, the glimpse of a different Gregory Mitchell, one who might have made a different choice. Across town, Laura and Sophia walked together along a tree-lined path in the botanical gardens, neither speaking of the envelope or its contents. Some conversations were complete even without words. Instead, they discussed Sophia's upcoming semester, Laura's summer reading program for underprivileged children, and whether the cafe near campus made better muffins than the one downtown. As they rounded a bend in the path, they encountered a young family, mother, father, and a little girl perhaps 3 years old who was examining a butterfly with wide-eyed wonder. The father knelt beside his daughter, his hand protectively at her back, his expression one of complete adoration as she chattered excitedly about orange wings and black spots. Both Laura and Sophia paused, watching the scene with complex emotions. Not envy exactly, but recognition of something precious they had both missed in different ways. The little girl looked up, noticed their attention, and waved enthusiastically. "Hello, ladies," she called with the unself-conscious friendliness of childhood. Sophia smiled and waved back. "Hello there. That's a monarch butterfly you found. They're very special." The child beamed at this new information before turning back to her father, tugging his hand to share her excitement. He lifted her effortlessly onto his shoulders, her small hands gripping his hair for balance as they continued down the path, her mother falling into step beside them. Laura and Sophia watched them go, the family of 3 gradually diminishing in size as they moved away along the sunlit path. "Some men," Laura said softly, "never understand what they have until it's gone. And some women," Sophia replied, linking her arm through her mother's, "build something beautiful from what remains." They continued their walk, 2 women who had faced abandonment and emerged not merely intact but strengthened, their bond forged in adversity, tempered by truth, and ultimately unbreakable. Behind them, the path stretched back toward choices made and opportunities lost. Ahead lay a future wholly their own. In the dappled sunlight of a Virginia summer morning, they walked forward together, leaving behind the shadows of what might have been and stepping fully into what was, a family complete unto itself, needing nothing more than what they had already found in each other. As we close the final chapter on this extraordinary true story, we're left to ponder the choices that shape not just our lives, but the lives of those who depend on us. When Gregory Mitchell chose career over family, when he decided a child would be an inconvenience rather than a blessing, he couldn't have imagined that 18 years later, the truth would emerge with such devastating clarity in that Richmond courtroom. What would you have done if faced with Laura's impossible choice, to be a mother or to be a wife? What courage would you have found within yourself? Sometimes the strongest people aren't those who win the most impressive victories, but those who endure the deepest wounds with dignity. Laura and Sophia built a complete family with just the two of them, proving that what matters most isn't who is missing from our lives, but who chooses to stay. And perhaps the most profound truth revealed in this courtroom drama is that acknowledgement, simply being seen, is one of the most fundamental human needs we all share. If this story touched your heart or made you reflect on the choices in your own life, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. The silent battles people fight around us often go unnoticed, and sometimes a story like this can be the mirror they need to recognize their own strength. Follow our channel for more powerful true stories that remind us of our shared humanity, and leave a comment telling us what this story taught you about family, truth, and the courage to stand alone when necessary.